Okay, so I guess we can get started. Thank you, everyone that's already connected. I think everyone else is already celebrating Valentine's. Let's get going because it is 10:05, and I'm sure more people will connect as time is going. Pero thank you so much again, Jennifer, for being with us today, and I'm excited for this topic. Adelante. Please let us know about you, your company. I know we've had you before, but it's always good to refresh who is with us today.
Of course. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me.
Of
My
course.
name is also Jennifer, so it won't be hard for you guys to remember. And I'm with Sunny Title. It is a title company owned by myself and my husband. One of the things that I enjoy doing the most, besides closings, of course, is teaching. So I love to be able to put on these trainings for my agents. And I've actually wanted to do a homestead exemption class for quite some time. And every time January comes around, it's like I don't get around to doing it. So Jennifer actually inspired me because she requested this class. So she inspired me to do the class. And I also did this class for a group of my agents yesterday. And I was very pleasantly surprised of like how interested everybody was on this topic. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about homestead exemption and portability. So if you want to allow me to share my screen, or if I can.
I believe you're able to. It already has all the settings.
Okay, perfect. All right. So another thing I just want to mention is if you have any questions, because have questions throughout, I'm going to go through the whole presentation in case I answer your question by the time we get to the next slide sometimes. So if not, go ahead and write it in the chat. And what I'll do is at the end of the class, I'll go through the chat, see if anybody had questions, and answer them at that time. Okay, so let's get started. Homestead exemption and portability, everything you need to know. As we all know, January and February are big months. Every realtor's posting. Don't forget to file for your homestead exemption. We all know the deadline is March 1st, but what really is homestead exemption? What are the benefits? What is portability? How do you apply? So we're going to be going over all the benefits. We're going to go into portability as well. And I'm going to show you a step-by-step for Miami-Dade of what it looks like when your customer is filing online. I just feel like it's easier when you know what they're looking at, and then you can also see how easy it is. And my goal is that at the end of this class today, you contact all your buyers from last year and say, hey, I want to remind you that you need to file for homestead exemption. And here are some tips that I want you to know so that you're successful in filing for the homestead exemption. So that is my goal. Hopefully, you guys can do it and feel a little bit more confident when you make that call. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with the basics. What is homestead exemption? So we know that homestead exemption is a valuable property tax benefit that can save homeowners up to $50,000 in taxable value. Now, the 50,000 is divided where the first 25,000 applies to all taxing authorities. So across the board, everybody gets that exemption. But then the additional 25,000 is for all taxing authorities minus the school board. So the school board is the only one that receives only a $25,000 exemption, whereas all the other taxing authorities, the borrowers or the homeowners are available to get 50,000. And I'm going to show you an example of what that means, right? We talk about the 50,000. We're like, what is it? I know that 25,000 goes to everybody, and there's 25,000 that doesn't go to the school board. So like, what does that actually mean? I'll show you in the next screen. And as I already mentioned, of course, the deadline is March 1st, which today is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. I forgot to say that. But there's less than 2 weeks away, if you really think about it, for people to get this done. So it's, I think, like perfect timing to make those calls. Then there's another benefit, which is probably my favorite benefit of homestead exemption, is the Save Our Homes cap. Basically, this is an additional benefit that limits the annual increase of that assessed value to 3% or the consumer price index, whichever is least. And what that does is basically over time, it saves that homeowner thousands of dollars in their taxes because it's, again, a benefit that only if you apply for homestead exemption, The property, of course, being your primary residence that you're able to receive. So, a perfect example for agents is like whenever you look at a property, of course, you look at taxes because the buyer wants to know what the taxes are on that property. And you see that this homeowner has owned the property for 10, 15 years, and you're like, oh my God, the taxes are so cheap. Well, guess what? The taxes are so cheap because of this Save Our Home cap versus you may look at a house in the same neighborhood, same size, but that person only maybe bought that property 3 years ago and the taxes are way higher. So it's kind of like, they throw around the term grandfathered in. It's exactly what it is. So imagine owning a property and your taxes are so low year after year compared to what's in the community or in the neighborhood. It's because of that Save Our Home cap. So now let's go into the example that I wanted to talk to you about, right? Because we talk about the 50,000. What does that 50,000 really, where's the discount coming in? So if you look at a tax bill, you're going to see that there is first section says taxing authority. So it lists all the different taxing authorities. Okay. And then there's an assessed value. So this is the assessed value that the county gives on the property. And then there's a column for exemption. So this is how you know if the home is receiving an exemption or not. But if you notice at the top for Miami School Board, it's only receiving a $25,000 exemption. So if we do the assessed value minus the $25,000 exemption, for this particular line item, taxes are based off the 149.76. But as we look at the other taxing authorities that are listed, you see that they're getting a $50,000 discount. So again, 165 is the assessed value, $50,000 is the exemption, and really they're being taxed on 115,976. So that is what they mean when they talk about the 50,000 and when they say only 25,000 goes to the school board and everybody else gets 50,000. I know I may be a nerd, but I think that this makes it easier for you to understand and kind of your customer may ask you like, I don't understand what the benefit is, or they think $50,000. I mean, they think all kinds of things when they hear the word $50,000, but it's on the taxable amount. And this is an easy example of way for you to explain it to them as well. So what is needed to apply? Well, first, as of January 1st, that property has to be the permanent residence, primary residence of that owner. In addition, they need to have their Florida driver's license updated with the new property address. So it can't be there if they never got around to changing their driver's license and it still shows their old address and they try to file for homestead exemption, the system's going to allow them to file for it, but once it gets reviewed, it's going to get rejected because one of the requirements is that you have to have your new address on that on your driver's license. If not, then as far as the state is concerned, as far as Miami-Dade, Broward, you don't qualify. This goes the same for your Florida registration. So Florida registration has to be updated as well. And usually when the owner changes their driver's license, the system will automatically ask them if they want to change their voter registration as well. So that, you take care of both at the same time. And then there's the automobile registration. So if the owner has a car under their name, they need to update it with the new property address as well. And another item that they ask for is if you are a permanent resident, meaning they're not a U.S. citizen, they have to give their immigration number. And I wanted to point something out. If any of you deal with, buyers who purchased here and they're not U.S. citizens, they're here in the country legally, they can apply for homestead exemption. For some reason, somebody started a rumor because it's happened with a lot of my customers who deal with buyers who have purchased and they're not U.S. citizens. They think that because they're not a U.S. citizen, they do not qualify for this benefit, and they absolutely 100% do as long as it's their primary residence. Now, in addition to these documents, there's going to be additional information that is going to be requested, but we'll get to that because it's simple. It's social security number, date of birth, marital status. So those are things that the customer already knows. These are the actual items that they need to provide.
Okay. Jennifer, let me ask you something real quick. So we're talking about obviously the primary resident, but what happens if perhaps somebody owns the duplex? They live in the one side and the other side is for rent. Or if it's a multifamily, they still live in one and the rest is for rent. What happens then?
Yes, and that's a great question. I do cover that, but since you're asking it already, so when it comes to a duplex, and we saw that in the last few years, it became a huge trend, especially with the younger generation, because I did a lot of closings for people in their, 25, 28, and how were they going about buying a house? They're like, well, I'm not going to buy a house. I'm going to buy a duplex. I'm going to live on one side. I qualify for FHA, and I'm going to rent the other side. So what happens when it comes to homestead exemption is when it's a duplex, if you only occupy half of the duplex or one side of it, then you will be able to get homestead exemption on that side. You will not be able to get it on the full property. Now, there are people that buy a duplex, not many, but and use the entire duplex as their home. Funny enough, growing up, my aunt had a duplex and she just like used the whole entire the whole entire home is what she lived in. She never rented it out. So in her case, she can apply for homestead exemption on the full property. But if it's a duplex, then the customer's only going to apply for half of it. And guess what? Your customer doesn't have to do anything. It's already something that it's Miami-Dade already knows that property is a duplex. So they will base it off whether they live on the whole portion of the property or just on half of it. Same thing if it's a multi-unit property, you can only file for homestead exemption on the part that you live in. And we'll talk a little bit about Airbnb and what those things, because that's just something that throughout the years it's just become popular. But yeah, thank you for asking that, Jennifer. I got excited. If you saw, I smiled. I was like, yay, a question.
I'm definitely taking notes on that one. So thank you for answering.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go over of course the majority of your agents probably do Miami-Dade and Broward, but to be honest, any county, most counties in the state of Florida are allowing it to be done, apply for homestead exemption online. Many years ago, the customer would actually have to go in person, like if they would either mail it or go in person, and most people didn't feel comfortable mailing it, so they'd actually go downtown, go through the hassle of looking for parking, then spend half of their morning there just to file for their homestead exemption. But now I would say 95% of the state of Florida allows you to do it online, and they make it very easy and convenient. So I'm providing you what it looks like for Miami-Dade. So there's a link, and after our class today, I'll send you the links as well as any other forms that I speak about on this class so that you guys can have it, easily available to you. So when you go to the Miami-Dade property appraiser, there's this big blue button. You can't miss it. Homestead exemption application online filing. You click on that button. Broward County, same thing. They have it. You can't miss it. Homestead online. So this is what Dade looks like. This is what Broward looks like. Very easy. So we're actually going to be going through, excuse me, do a step-by-step example of what it looks like when you're filing online for a Miami-Dade property. Now, Miami-Dade and Broward, the websites look different. They definitely do. But as far as the process, it's very similar. The information, it's very similar. So if you see the Miami-Dade one, trust me when I tell you that Broward looks very similar as well. The information is the same because it's the same information that's required by the state of Florida. It has nothing to do with the county. It's the state of Florida is the one that mandates what documents are necessary for homestead exemption. Another thing I want to mention, because as you start calling your customers and you say, hey, don't forget, remember I told you at closing, you have to file for homestead exemption. They're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. What do I need to do? They also should have received a letter from the property appraiser's office with a paper application. So remember that when your customer purchases a property, those documents get recorded in the public records. The property appraisers alerted that there's a new homeowner, and they send out a letter to every single homeowner that closed last year and purchased a property and said, if this is your primary, you can apply online or you can file the paper application. They do not need to do both. In fact, they should not do both. They should pick one or the other. And my suggestion is obviously get it done online, because I'll walk you through the steps. You'll see it gives you a confirmation at the end, and you can even track it online. Whereas a paper application, I don't know how much faith I have in the United States Postal Service. So I wanted to point that out. And it's funny because I've had a few clients call me from last year and I'm like, didn't you get a letter from the property appraiser's office? And they're like, yeah, I did, but I opened it and I kind of put it to the side and I really didn't know what it was about. So I'm pretty sure as you call your clients, they're going to be telling you the same thing. So here is what it looks like when you get into the homestead exemption application online for Miami-Dade. And it simply goes over, these are the items that you're going to need in order to apply. Now, I want to say it from the beginning, and it's one of my tips that I like to tell all my buyers is make sure that when you're applying, you, one, have gathered all this information, you have it ready to go. And once you apply, you've allocated, 20 minutes, 30 minutes maximum for you to actually start it from beginning to end because there is no save option. So if you start applying and then you get to like the third tab and now your kid needs help with homework and you stop and help them with their homework, once you get back it's timed you out and now you have to start it all over. So that's tip number one. Just make sure that when they sit down, they start it, they end it, and they give themselves 20 to 30 minutes to get it done, and of course have all these items ready. I did this example for you. I actually had a customer who called me and they needed help. And I said, if you don't mind, can you please come into my office and I will help you file it, but I need it to use it for a class. So I've taken out all their private information, but I really wanted to give you that step by step because it's so much easier to learn. Okay, so going on. When you get to this page, simple, choose tax year. That's easy. You're going to be filing homestead exemption for 2024 and enter folio number. So let's say your customer is like, I have no idea what the folio number is. Miami-Dade has done a great job where they say, hey, the first item you need is your folio number. You may locate your folio number using this link. So all they do is simply click on that link. They put their address, which takes them to the property appraiser, and they're able to obtain their folio number. So Miami-Dade does it super easy. Broward is the same way. Your client doesn't have to look for it. Like they can just click, it takes them to the page, and then they come back in and enter their folio number. So once they enter the folio number, they'll put apply now, and it takes you to the next tab. So if you look at the top of the screen, there's different tabs. So you have to, in order to get to the next tab, you got to complete the first tab. So that's why it's important to have all the information with you because it's not going to let you just go back and forth. Now, once you put in your folio number, it's going to appear here. And again, I've blacked it out to, protect my customers' privacy. And it's also going to list the current owners of record. So, if the owner was John Smith and Jane Smith, those are the two names that appear here. It's going to give them the mailing address, the property address. So your customers are able to verify, yes, this information is all correct. Now, let's say that they get to this page, which does happen, especially if they closed in December, and it's not their name. It's still the previous owner's name. They should not freak out because they do tend to freak out and say, oh my gosh, the house is not mine. It is yours. But being that you closed in December, it can take the property appraiser sometimes 2 months or so for them to update it in their system. And it just may have been that they haven't updated it. So let's say that they haven't. This is the first question it asks is the ownership record correct? So if it's not correct, they're going to select no. And then it simply tells you if your response to question number one is no, please enter your deed information below. If you don't have your deed information, because they're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. They usually call the title company, or again, they can click on this blue link and they're going to be able to put their name and search the deed. Now, this is where you as an agent can really be valuable to your client. So if your client calls you and says, hey, I don't know, I don't know how to look up the deed. My information's not showing up. It's still showing the seller's name from the previous, owner. One, you can calm them down and say, don't worry, that's because we close in December, but let me help you obtain that book and page. If that's the case, they would enter the book and page here and the sale date, which is the closing date. So for most cases, if they didn't close in December, it should already show updated. Then it continues on to ask, do you have ownership of the property through a trust? So if they had the property under a trust, then they would have to put yes. If not, simply no. Is the mailing address shown above correct? So not necessarily does every customer use their property address as their mailing address. Some people like to say, well, I don't like to get my mail at home. I rather get it at my office, or I rather get it to a P.O. box. I've had a few buyers tell me mail it to my mom's house because I'll always, my mom always will check the mail and she'll make sure if it's important that I get to it. So I think that's funny. It's happened to me in 2 occasions and I always crack up. So yeah, if they get it sent to their mom's address, that's where it's going to show. If it's incorrect, then they want to update it here. So that's nice. Then we go on to the second tab, or I should say third tab, who is applying. So they're going to select the person who's applying. Let's say it's John Smith, right? And he's applying. It's his job to get this done. So he's going to select his name. It's automatically going to generate over here in this section where it says first name and last name. And then he's going to fill out his information, his social security number, his date of birth, his marital status, his address and his phone number. Simple, simple, simple. Nothing complicated. These are all things that, he should know, hopefully. So then next tab is going to be Florida resident. So again, it's going to say, date of permanent residency at this property. So when did they, move into the property? When did it become their primary residence? That's the date. And, sometimes people don't remember, right? They're like, I don't know if I moved in on the 18th or the 20th. Honestly, it's as long as it's a good estimate of what they think they moved in, that will work. It's also asked them for their driver's license number. So notice it's asking for the driver's license number. It's not asking them to upload a picture of their driver's license. However, once the application is processed, the property appraiser's office is going to be able to look up that driver's license number and see if the customer has updated the driver's license to reflect the property address. And if they have not, then they will be denied for homestead exemption. It's also going to ask them for the issue date, vehicle tag number. So of course, if they have a car under their name, then they would put the vehicle information here. If they don't have a car under their name, because some people don't, then they just leave it blank. Click submit. It's going to go on to the next page. U.S. citizen. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Even if your client is not a U.S. citizen, as long as they're legal here in the country, they can apply for homestead exemption. So it will ask them, are you a U.S. citizen? Yes. If you are, it's going to ask them for the voter registration number. Now, the great thing about this is because sometimes you get your voter registration card, once you update your address, and then you don't remember where you put it. Miami-Dade has done an amazing job of making this so easy for homeowners to complete this application that they even give you a link that says, if you need to find your registration number, go ahead and click on this link. When you click on the link, it's going to take you to another page that all it asks you is for your first name, last name, and your date of birth. All things that you should know. And it is going to generate the information that shows up on your voter registration. So it's going to give you your registration number. So again, super easy. I had a customer who called me last week and said, Jennifer, I've been having problem getting the new mail at the home. I have not been able to, it's like on and off. I'm getting some stuff. I'm not. I've had to request my voter registration card again. Like, where do I find this information? Easy. It's already in the process of when you're applying. I'll also send you this link separately in my email in case you guys want to have it for, whatever reason. I thought it was a great information to have. Now, if your client is not a U.S. citizen, they're going to say no. And then here is where they have to put in their alien number. So again, super easy for the client to do. The next tab is going to take them to previous address. So previous address is where they lived. It also asks them if they received or filed for exemption last year. So this is where the portability comes in, and we'll get into portability in a few. But it's going to ask them, did you file for exemption last year? Yes, they need to answer yes. So if you're an agent and you helped your client sell their primary residence and buy a primary residence, trust me that most clients, they don't even understand this question and they will answer no when they really should be answering yes, because by answering yes, they get an additional benefit.
Dice, ¿qué fue que no les ha llegado el regalo?
Acaba de llegar un carro, vino a entregar.
Hello.
I think we need to mute.
Todo aquel.
Sí, sí,
Christina.
Mira esa belleza.
hermoso, ¿no?
Sorry.
Mira, de
I
qué
can't.
Tomarle la foto.
El
mira.
Emilio.
Espérate, vamos a ver si que ya había llegado. Entonces le voy a tomar la
Oh my
foto.
goodness.
Sí.
Sorry about this, guys.
Voy a llamar. Por eso es que yo bajé. Me dice, ñaña, ya está ahí. Yo buscando por todos lados y no está.
I'm gonna
Ay,
call
qué
her.
lindo. Qué lindo de estar. Ya le llamaste entonces.
Ya, ya.
Que entonces que había entregado a Lady.
Sí.
Whoever's
Kelly,
admin can mute her.
Ah, sí.
Nelly,
Sí,
es
Lady.
un carro, acaba de dejarme.
Sí,
Should be able to
It's,
mute
it's her,
her
it's her
as,
Zoom. We can't mute her.
Right.
oh, okay, if it's her Zoom, no.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Venga, venga, Nana.
Okay, perfect. So, again, did they apply, did the applicant receive or file for exemptions last year? They have to say yes if they had exemption on a property, the previous year. And then do you wish to apply for transfer of homestead assessment difference, aka portability, within Florida only? I guarantee you, if you contact your clients, they have no idea what this question is about. So when you don't know what the question is asking you, automatically the first thing you do is put no, right? I mean, that's just human nature. So again, if you're an agent and you helped a seller sell last year and buy this year, then it's extremely important that you tell them for question number 15, you have to answer yes. So as long as they sold, of course, here in Florida, and they purchased another primary residence in Florida, they will be able to get this portability. If you have a client that moved from Florida to South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, wherever it is, unfortunately, they do not get that benefit. It's only within Florida. And we will touch on portability next, because that's one question that I get all the time from agents. So again, previous address, if they have they have to list their previous address, and they also have to list their previous address or their last address shown on their IRS return. So this should be fairly easy. And then verify information. So it gives you a summary of all the questions that you answered so that you as the customer can kind of look at it again, make sure that you didn't do a typo, everything looks great. If you did, you can simply put edit and it's going to allow you to fix it. If you didn't, then you go on to the next screen, which is add applicants. So in most cases, right, we have a husband and wife who purchase a property. They're both on title. And it's usually somebody's job to do this homestead exemption, right? Like it's either the husband or the wife. It's important that if you have a customer that purchased husband and wife, that they don't assume that because they're married, they don't have to apply for homestead exemption on their spouse. They absolutely should. I mean, I cannot tell you or stress. I had this happen to one of my customers this year. The husband filed for the homestead exemption, and I had put something on my Instagram story, and the buyer reached out to me and said, Jennifer, my husband didn't apply for me. He said he didn't know how, like it didn't give him the option. He just did it for himself, but not for me. And I was like, I didn't want to, they're a very nice couple. I've worked with them on several transactions and I didn't know how to say it in a nice way. Well, yeah, he did it wrong. He should have definitely in this section did add applicant. So what I suggested is contacting the property appraiser to see how she can fix it. And basically the property appraiser said the only way to fix it is now you have to actually do a paper application as well. So because her husband did not add her online, now she had to do the paper application because you can only apply, once you apply with that folio number, it will only accept that application once online. If there's any errors, you have to now do a paper application. So she was not too happy, but she got it done. So just know that if you're dealing with a husband and wife, both of them on title, and it's both their primary, which obviously it should be, both of them should be applying. Now, let's say you're dealing with a boyfriend or girlfriend, a mother-daughter situation, two friends that bought, whatever the case is. If both of them are living in the property and it's their primary residence, they should be applying. If there's 3 people on title and all 3 of them live in the home, it's their primary, all 3 of them should be applying for homestead exemption.
I wanted to ask you something right here, Jennifer. Yes, I wanted to ask you because I have a scenario coming soon where the parents are elderly and they want to add their son to their new purchase. their son does not live with them. And as a matter of fact, he lives in a completely different city. So at this point, I guess all three of them need to be added, or only the two elderly, the couple that lives there?
So the only people that should be applying for the homestead exemption is whoever lives in the property. Even if he lives in another state, you cannot file for homestead exemption on two properties. You can only file it for one. And one way or another, I really don't know how, but the property appraiser knows these things. So you definitely don't want to be caught up in filing for homestead, having a homestead exemption fraud. So if he is, and like you said, when I showed you the screen where it asked the names, they're only going to add the applicant, which you'll see it says if you want to add an applicant, if I'm not mistaken, you see right here, it has, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but it says
Yes.
who is applying number 4. They're just going to pick the next person's name that is applying. And then once it's going to pretty much go through the same steps that it did for the first person. And then once you get to add applicant again, you're going to say, no, you don't need to add anybody else. So definitely
Perfect.
he should not be filing for homestead exemption if he doesn't live in the property.
Perfect.
Because again,
Yes.
he's going to have to update his driver's license, voter
Yeah, he
registration.
doesn't do that.
So,
yes, thank you.
definite. No, of course. Okay, so as I showed you, add applicant, husband, wife, whoever else is on title, that it's their primary, you're going to go through the same exact steps. I'm not going to, go through it again, but you saw how easy it was, how simple, basic information that it's asking for. It makes it very easy. And the reason why you want everybody who filed for homestead exemption or everybody who lives in the property to file for homestead exemption is because let's say somebody passes away, right? You have two people on title. Let's just say, a mom and daughter, and the mom is the only one that filed for homestead exemption because, she didn't want to have to deal with like doing it for her daughter. And okay, now the mom passes away. The homestead exemption is removed from the property, which now triggers the property taxes to be reassessed. So if you've been living in that property for 5 years, 10 years, all that save our home cap that you've been being able to benefit from is going to all go away. And it's going to reassess the property based on the assessed value of the property on that year, which obviously is going to be a lot higher. And then that person now has to file for homestead exemption and they'll get the benefits moving forward, but they won't get the benefits from the time that their, mom owned the property, even though it was their primary. It is almost impossible to get the property appraiser, even if you show them proof, to change it. They're very black and white. You should have filed for homestead exemption. And every year you receive a renewal letter. And in the renewal letter, it says who filed for homestead exemption. Your name was not on there for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. I've seen this happen more than once before. And it's horrible because now you've been paying, let's say, $3,000 in taxes, and now it's been 10 years, and now your taxes went up to $10,000. It's extremely sad. So I can't stress enough, everybody should be applying who is on title.
I
Okay,
have another
so-
question. Sorry. I keep
Yeah, no, go ahead.
interrupting you. But as you're speaking,
I
it's
love
like,
the
okay.
question.
And
I love
honestly,
the
this is what
questions.
I'm asking from the team. It's like if they have any questions, interrupt, and then that way it's more interactive, right? So you did mention Save Our Homes cap, right? Now, how does that work? So Save Our Home cap plus the homestead exception, or how one outweighs the other, or where's the merit there?
It's okay. That's our next screen. And I'm big on examples. I have to give examples. It's the only way my brain works. So I figure everyone else's brain works the same. But it should be our next screen. One thing, since we are talking about portability, as you see at the top of the screen, it said add applicant. Let's say we already added it. Portability. In this example, this customer that I did their homestead exemption, they did not own a property the year before, so I had to answer no. So automatically that tab doesn't open up for me. But if they said yes to question, I believe it's question 14 or 15, like, yes, I want to transfer my portability, then they would have put yes, then this little tab would have opened for them to now fill out with their previous address where they lived at. That is the only way that the county knows that you want to transfer it. Like, it sounds silly. Why are they asking me? Of course I want to transfer it, but it's one of their questions. And if you put no, this tab will not open and you will not receive that portability benefit. And it's my understanding that it's not like you can add it next year. Like it is what it is. It had to be added at the time that you filed for homestead exemption. So we'll talk about the benefits because I think it will sink in and make a lot more sense. But before we get there, there's this another tab that talks about attachments. So it says if there's anything else additional information regarding your homestead or the transfer portability, you can attach documents here. In most cases, I really never see a reason to attach anything. I did have a scenario where I had a customer, they bought in the beginning of the year with her fiance. So they were both on title. She still had her maiden name. And then before the year ended, they officially got married and now her name changed. So on title, she had, I don't know, let's just say her title appeared as Jane Smith. But now that she got married, it should be, I don't know, Jane Martinez. So when, of course, the property appraiser looks at her driver's license, it doesn't match. Her name on her driver's license and her name on title, for all they know, it's not the same person. So in this case, she added her marriage license. She added her old license and also her new driver's license, and she attached it as files here to show proof that she is the same person. So I thought that was a nice addition that Miami-Dade has, because sometimes there's weird scenarios and you need to be able to add documentation to explain it. And as you see, there's no space for you to write a note or a letter to Miami-Dade or Broward. It's just like, these are the facts, add them. So this attachment, I think it's great. So let's say you have nothing to attach, you're just going to put done, and now it's complete. So this is the confirmation that the application was submitted. I, of course, always say print it, have it for your records. It confirms the date you filed it, the time it was filed, your receipt number for each person that filed. And then one thing that I like to mention is that when you're filing for homestead exemption, you can only do the homestead exemption and portability online. If you have any additional exemptions, and they're all listed down here. So if you're over 65 with limited income, if you're a widow, if you're blind, if you're totally or permanently disabled, all these other exemptions that are listed, veteran, disabled veteran, so on and so forth, surviving spouse of a first responder, all of these have to be done through a paper application. So once you do it online, if any of these, if your customer qualifies for any of these, they have to then click on this link, which is going to give them the paper application that they have to fill out and send it in. I do not know why the property appraisers has not added a tab. Maybe it's way too many exemptions and it would be like too much, too much work for them to update their system to recognize that. But if you have a customer that they would qualify for one of these, it's additional benefit that they can get. It's more money that they can save. So the paper application is here. I'm also going to email it to you as part of the presentation so that you guys can have that easily available for your client. And it's a very simple application. It's honestly not complicated at all. So if we were to actually have done this, and when I did it with this customer, it took me from beginning to end less than 20 minutes. Less than 20 minutes. Obviously, I'm explaining it, I'm asking questions, but you see how simple it is. It's very simple. It can be done in no time, but your customers should not be waiting until March 1st or February 29th or February 28th. They should be getting that done today in case they run into any issues. So here is the paper application. So as you see, it's very simple. It's very straightforward. And this application, just so you know, it's for Dade, Broward. It is a Florida document. So regardless of where the property is located, this is the Florida document. There's not one for Broward or one for Dade. It's the same one. So this is the form. They have to sign it and send it in. If I were them, I'd probably take it in person just to be on the safe side. So another great feature, and I was not able to find this feature in the Broward website. So if any of you know, that would be great. I was only able to find it in Miami-Dade. So Miami-Dade has a way that you can track the status of your exemption. I mean, just like we track our packages, our Amazon, our generation loves to track everything, right? It makes us feel like comfortable. It makes us feel assured that it's getting done. So you want to go ahead and track your homestead exemption, and they make it very easy. You just put the folio number down here, you submit inquiry, and then here it is down here. So it shows you the folio number, the year that you applied for, the type of exemption, and then it'll tell you that the status is pending. I also called the property appraiser's office because I said, okay, this is great. We can track it here, but like when do we officially know? According to the property appraiser, they start sending letters out in the beginning of July, and it's a first, whoever applied first, those are the first letters that go out. So I don't know, they weren't able to tell me how long it takes them to send those letters out, but I would say if by August you haven't received anything, contact the property appraiser just to make sure that you that the application was approved, or if it was denied, what it was denied for, to see if you can get it fixed. So portability, this is what you were asking on, Jennifer. So it's one of these subjects that people kind of, they know that the word exists, but they don't really know what it is. So homeowners can actually transfer or port the difference between the assessed value and the market value from their previous homestead property. They also call this the homestead assessment difference. And it's up to 500,000. And we'll get into an example so that it makes a lot of sense. Homestead exemption does not automatically transfer to your new property. You actually have to, if you had homestead exemption on a previous property, you have to remove that property from homestead exemption. And again, every year, once you apply for homestead exemption, which you only do it once, every year from that point on, you receive from the property appraiser a renewal receipt letter. And that says, if this is still your homestead, great, you have nothing to do. If this is no longer your homestead, you need to fill this out and send it back so that you can remove the homestead from that property and avoid being penalized. Especially if you purchased a property, you still need to do the process of canceling the homestead exemption on the previous property and filing the homestead. Because again, Miami-Dade is and Broward, they're gonna take whatever application you submit. But if you did not cancel the homestead exemption on the previous property, it's going to deny it and say, well, you still have homestead on this property. Is this no longer your homestead? So it's an added step that you don't want to have to worry about. So you definitely have to notify the property appraisers on that. And when it comes to portability or save our homes, the benefit is earned on the previous homestead property to the new homestead property. And beginning as of January 1st, 2021, if you're applying for a new homestead exemption and you held homestead exemption on your previous property, you can still get that benefit within the last 3 tax years. So not necessarily does everybody, sell in 2023 and was able to buy in 2023 for XYZ reason. But as long as they purchase within that 3-year tax year, they're fine. Anytime after that, they would no longer be able to get this benefit. So if you have a client who sold and they still haven't purchased and they sold in 2023, maybe it's like a good way to give them a call and say, hey, do you know that you're going to lose out on this like huge benefit if you don't buy within the next 3 tax years? So who knows? It might motivate them. Here is an example. So I think like the biggest question that I get asked is like, well, how does the portability work? How much is it? Like, how do I know? Miami-Dade and Broward both have this information on their website. And I am not going to lie to you. Prior to preparing for this class, I knew about portability, but I knew it was market values minus assessed value, but I didn't know that the property appraiser does this for you. It already has it. So if you go to the property appraiser, and this is Miami-Dade, if you go to their website and you put in your old address, the one that you sold, there's a section called assessment information, which is a snippet that you see here. It shows what in 2023 the market value was, and then it shows you what the assessed value was. So again, market value minus assessed value is your Save Our Homes cap. So if we do simple math, 463,067, which is the market value, minus the assessed value of 165,976, your Save Our Home caps, which again, Miami-Dade already does math for you. I love it. Tells you right here, Save Our Homes cap, $297,091. So up to $500,000 you can port. After $500,000, you can't. Your limit would be $500,000, but it tells you the amount right here. And this is going to be in addition to your regular homestead. So this is your Save Our Home cap. This is what's going to be transferred to that new home, an additional savings. So Broward does the same thing. Broward's website's a little different. If you go to the property appraiser at the top, Broward has all these little, I don't know, like little clip arts of like a little house, a little money sign, and you're going to see one that says portability. You click on that and you fill out the little questions that it asks you, and it's going to tell you how much the amount of the transfer is going to be. Amazing. They make it so easy. These are tools that we probably go on the property appraiser all the time. I know I do. I never noticed this. So I was very excited about this. Now let me show you an example of what this looks like. So this is actually from the property appraiser's website. It's kind of a sample. They used 100,000 just because it's easy math, right? Like they didn't use my $297 and $91, but they used easy math. And there's a difference. If your customer is upsizing, meaning their new market value on their home is higher than the one they sold, it works one way. If they downsize, meaning they went from a bigger market value price to now a lower one, it changes. So the first box that we see is an example of upsizing. So it clearly tells you previous home. So the previous home had a market value of 250,000. It had an assessed value of 100,000. Easy math, the difference of the assessed value and market value is 100,000. That's why you see here that they put 100,000. That is the amount that's going to be ported or transferred to the new home. So your new home has a market value of 400,000. The amount that you're porting is the 100,000. So now your taxes are going to be assessed on 300,000. Now, of course, this doesn't include the homestead exemption. That would be an additional 50,000. So it's a huge savings. Like if you really look at this, I feel horrible for anybody who does not answer the application correctly and doesn't benefit from this portability. So this is an easy example. Now, if they're downsizing, the math is a bit different. So same example, they use the same market value of 250,000, assessed value of 150,000, and then our Save Our Homes difference, which again is 100,000. Now, when they're downsizing, they went from a market value of 250 to 200. They unfortunately do not get to get the full port of 100,000, but this is how you calculate it. So down here, I have step one. So you get the previous Save Our Homes difference, which again is 100,000, and you divide that by the previous market value, which we know is 250,000. And it gives us a cap ratio of 0.4. That cap ratio of 0.4, we're going to multiply it by the new market value, which in this case is 200,000. That gives us a port of 80,000. So I know it sounds a little, for those of you that don't like math, or it sounds a little confusing, you can always reach out to me after. I'd be more than happy to use your particular example so that it makes more sense. But in this case, they're only able to port 80,000. So their market value minus the 80,000, now their assessed value is going to be on 120,000. Again, it's a huge savings. It's something that most people, I think, don't realize. But especially when you have that customer who's like, I'm selling and my taxes were so low, but now I'm buying and the taxes are so high, remind them, you're going to be able to port a portion of the savings from your previous taxes. Are you going to be able to give them an exact amount? No, right? Because the county has to create whatever that new market value is on the new home. But if they've been living there for quite some time, and again, you can look up their property. I already showed you where you can see what that amount is that's going to be ported. That's going to help in their taxes tremendously. So that's a good selling point for those of your clients that, I don't want to deal with higher taxes. Well, they're going to be higher, definitely higher, but they're not going to be as bad as they think. So of course we have to talk about homestead exemption fraud, and we know that these things do not happen in Miami, does not happen in South Florida, but you just need to know. So if the customer rents all or substantially all of a home, it constitutes abandonment of the home exemption if the property is rented for more than 30 days for 2 consecutive calendar years. So for those, which I didn't know was a thing, there's people who actually have a primary home, and in order to make extra money, they decide that they want to put their property on Airbnb. They go live with a family member over the summer for 2 months, and guess what? They Airbnb it, but that is more than 30 days. Now, if they do that for 2 consecutive years, then that would be considered an abandonment of their homestead exemption, so they can no longer receive that homestead exemption. Now, you might be wondering, who is going to say anything, Jennifer? Miami-Dade, Broward County, they're not driving around to see if you rent your house or not. But I can tell you who will be the first one to make a complaint. Either an unhappy Airbnb customer, right? They see that, for whatever reason, they don't think that they wanted a discount or they weren't happy with the home. People know about these things. It's public information. They know if the property is receiving homestead exemption, just like you guys can look it up, so can anybody else. And there's very savvy people out there. So they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go over to the property appraiser's website. There's a link that says file for if you know of any fraudulent homestead exemption, and they can file a complaint. And I can guarantee you that the property appraiser does look into this. They do take this very serious, and it's not a position that you want to be in. So, of course, if you're using your primary and trying to rent it through Airbnb, which apparently is a thing, definitely need to be very careful what they're doing. Now, if they're bought a property as a primary residence and now they're renting it out, they definitely need to get that homestead exemption removed. You cannot play, oh, I didn't know, I didn't receive that letter. It does not work. They will definitely penalize you. And just so you know what the penalty is, they can go up to 10 years back, 50% penalty, and 15% interest. It adds up, guys. I've had closings, plenty of them, where we pull title and this lien is filed, and somebody who should have removed their homestead exemption did it, and now at time of closing they're having to pay $15,000, $20,000 in penalties. It's not good, not fun. So if you have a customer who you know that has moved out of their primary residence because they decided to rent somewhere else, or they had a change in jobs, so they had to move, or temporary moving to another state, whatever it is, and they're renting out their property, make sure to remind them that they need to remove their homestead exemption. It's definitely these penalties are serious and they do add up. Now, tips that you should be sharing with your clients. This is a few tips that I wrote down for you so that when you're making those calls to your clients or reminding them to file for homestead exemption, you can have kind of like a little cheat sheet. Deadline to file is March 1st. You can provide them the list of the documents that they're going to need to apply. That way they make sure they have them ready. You let them know to set aside enough time to complete the application, right? Remember, there's no option to save and finish later, so make sure you let them know that. Also remind them that each person on title, who it is their primary residence, even if it's your spouse, must file for homestead exemption. And then it also states you should also remind them you only have to file for homestead exemption once. So I think people like to hear the fact that I only have to do this once and never again. It kind of motivates them just to get it out of the way. And also if there's any additional exemptions that they want to apply for, widow, veteran, disability, and there's a whole list, that portion has to be done and a paper application. And of course, remind them that at the end of the day, they're going to be saving a lot of money. And not only this year, but year after year and every year that they have that property as their primary residence. So I hope you learned something today. I hope that this class at least got your brain moving a little bit to just motivate you to contact your clients from last year, or just be ready when your clients do call you and have any questions. But I would love to connect with all of you guys. My cell phone number is there, email, Instagram, office address, any questions you have, or any other suggestions for classes that you think, hey, we need to know about this. I would love to be able to help you with that. So I guess, Jennifer, do we have any other questions?
No, you've answered everything. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? ¿Alguna persona tiene preguntas? ¿Alguien por ahí? Anybody?
Don't be shy.
I think I was definitely taking notes. So thank you for this class. I really enjoyed it. No, I think we're good for now.
Awesome.
I'm sure I'm going to come back and pick your brain for more and invite you to another class, but I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, this is just something that as agents, right, we do a closing with our client. We've had a relationship maybe for 6 months. We know their kids. Once closing takes place, it's kind of like we move on to our next client. And it's not that we just forget about them, but this is a great way to touch back on those clients that did, close with you last year. They're going to be so appreciative to get a phone call from you. And for those that always feel like, oh, I don't know what to call my client and say, it's so awkward, this is the easiest phone call to make. Just, hey, did you file for a homestead exemption? If not, let me send you the links. Let me send you everything. Take care of that before March 1st so that you can make sure that you benefit from those savings. Because I guarantee you, when their taxes go up, and they get their tax bill in November and they realize they didn't file for homestead exemption, they're going to call you and say, my taxes went up and I didn't know I had to file for homestead exemption. Why didn't you tell me? It happens all the time. So this is a great way for you to just touch. And of course, it's Valentine's Day. Love on them, help them save money, and that's it.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that tip and that reminder. That is a good way of keeping up with your CRM. And that's definitely a good excuse to go back and do that. You know, like you said, it's an easy conversation to have and they'll definitely appreciate it. Bueno, thank you so much. Happy Valentine's to everyone. Much
Same
love
to
to
you.
all you guys. Un abracito a
Yes.
todos. Ciao.
Bye. Hasta luego.
Bye.
Gracias.